Glad for this opportunity to talk with the South Sound Autism Partnership Group. And today I'll be sharing some of my story and how I came to where I am now and what I'm currently doing in Puyallup. And anybody has any questions along the way, I guess you can put them in the chat and we'll get to them. Or as we get along, we'll finish. I'll try to answer questions as they come up. But um, so I started my medical journey when I chose to go to the Uniformed Services University of Health Sciences, which is a medical school that the military operates in Bethesda, Maryland. And so after I decided that I really wasn't as interested as I thought I would be in um, genetics and biotechnology in college, I decided I really enjoyed working with individuals and families and the challenges of medical care. And so went to this school. It's typical. People wonder about the military and how do they train physicians, and they really have a very good program. They do add extra focus on international health and diseases and emergency care, as you might imagine, things that affect soldiers. And so I feel like I got a good education there with some additional training in those areas, and that allowed me to do some work in different countries around the world. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But after I finished medical school, I went to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas for a pediatric residency. While there, I got to go on a few different trips down into Honduras, where we were doing nutritional surveillance on some of the families in some very remote areas, and in collaboration with kind of the U.S. and the Honduran government, we would work with teams from Honduras to gather information and then present that to the Honduran health authorities. I've got to do that a few times. From previous experience in life, had learned to speak Spanish, and so I was a translator on these trips as well as one of the medical providers. And so as I finished residency, um, our family was then sent to the training center at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. I don't know how many of you have ever been to Oklahoma, but if you can imagine the plains of Oklahoma where there's fields of corn and wheat and other crops, and then it kind of feels like the middle of nowhere. Then you go further south from there, even further into nowhere, and that's where they put Fort Sill. So it was a very kind of remote place, but for my kids at the time, it was great. They could run around outside, play how they wanted to, and I got to take care of the soldiers and their families there. Um, if anybody were to join the Army, this is where you're sent for your basic training. So we had a lot of very young soldiers there. I think they did that on purpose because soldiers often like to get into trouble. And since there's nothing to do there, there's nothing to get into trouble with. So it was kind of a remote place. And as we were there for 5 years. One of the years we were there, I was deployed with an infantry battalion to Iraq. And there I was saying goodbye to my kids at the time um, as I was leaving. It was a long year for my family and for me, but I was glad to come back home safe. And while we were there, we did not lose any soldiers to any kind of enemy actions, but there were a couple of accidents that took a couple of them. But I felt honored to serve with these soldiers and groups and contribute in that way. Here's part of our medical platoon and some of the ways we were set up over there. Um, I do have a large family. This was about a year after I came back, right before we were moving. But as you can see, I've got 8 kids there. My wife, very strong woman who's taken good care of everybody through all the years. But as I came back from deployment and decided I wanted to further my medical career and have more opportunities for my kids and family, we moved to Washington State, where we've been for the past 13 years. I, as a, as I went through my medical career, decided I wanted to get further training. One of my sons, Cole, was born with Down syndrome. And as I thought more and more about the impact I could have on the families I was seeing, decided to move more out of the primary care space and into specialty care. Really felt like I could help families who were experiencing similar things with a child who was neurodiverse or had other challenges. And I felt like my son really helped inspire some of that. These are pictures from him at a camp. It's called Camp Camp, or the second camp stands for Children Achieving Maximum Potential, that is run in Centerville, Texas. So this camp was started, I think 35 years ago by a couple of developmental behavioral pediatricians because they recognized that a lot of families who have children with special needs, and that is not just mental or behavioral needs, but also medical needs, often don't have the same kind of respite opportunities so their families get or feel. And so they set up programs to provide respite during the week and different places in the San Antonio area, but then during the summertime, they run several sessions where people can have their kids go. Each child is assigned a personal camp counselor. These are generally high school students or early college students who will then be that child's counselor for that week and let them have a full camp experience. They even are able to, on some of the weeks, to take care of medically complex individuals, where children on ventilators, for example, will be able to come there and receive their care while they're participating in different activities. And my son, Cole, loved this place. He loved the animals, especially. There were a couple times where he would run off and he would beeline it to the goats or to the horses. He liked to be close to them. Um, So I was able to be there a few times as one of the camp medical directors or camp medical officers, and really enjoyed going to this camp. I know there's similar things here in Washington, and I think it's great when we can help direct families to them because there really are great opportunities. Um, Also, during fellowship, a lot of my time I spent visiting smaller military bases, in particular up in Alaska. Most people think of Alaska as this picture here with this negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, just cold and snowy like this. And there's definitely cold and snow in Alaska, but there are also a lot of great people and a lot of great families who live there. And so through this experience, I did a lot of telemedicine work and helped establish some of that care for our pediatric group at Madigan. Um, in conjunction with a lot of this work, I was one of the main people who helped form the JBLM Cares Center, which I know many of you are aware of now, and how that impacts families. I was the first medical director there and worked with the team of original therapists who helped set up the center. All of the people in this picture, except for I think one, have now moved on to other positions. There are new therapists there, but the mission still continues um, with our ABA therapists, speech and occupational therapists at the CARES Center. So also during this time, I was the military representative on the State Interagency Coordinating Council. I know I met some of you through that agency, where we would advise the state on Part C funds and how early intervention was run through the state. Um, I turned that responsibility over to someone else as I retired from the military in August of last year. But I really enjoy being able to learn about how services are provided to the children of the state. Because of um, those connections, I was also part of the panel a couple of years ago that reviewed all of the automatically qualifying diagnoses in the state of Washington for early intervention services. So there were a panel of 3 physicians. We went through this entire list of several hundred medical diagnoses and updated the list to make sure it was current and up to date. Uh, Spent a few weeks or months overseas visiting families in very remote areas. These pictures are from Thailand. We joined with one of their medical teams, and knowing that I was a pediatrician, developmental pediatrician, they had me go out and visit some of these families who live in very remote places. You kind of get to a point where the vehicle can no longer go further, and then you walk. And some of these families, we think about, we feel like we're resource stressed here in Washington, and I, kind of take that perspective of some of these families. I mean, they live in bamboo huts in the middle of the jungle and have maybe a car battery for their electricity, which they can, run a radio off of sometimes and collect rainwater for their water sources. And so it just helps me realize that sometimes, you can think outside the box to help families with services that they need. And I feel like having gone to some of these places has helped me learn how to do that sometimes. Had an opportunity to go with the Coast Guard to some of the islands out in the middle of the Pacific. If anybody knows where Yap is, maybe I'll, you know, give you a big high five when I see you next time. Um, because I didn't know where it was before I went on this trip, but there are even, families there who I was able to meet with and see. So this was another location. This is not necessarily international, but it felt international in Puerto Rico. We did some work there with some of the military families who were stationed in that island. Um, I threw this in just for fun. In addition to medical work, I also like working with young adults and youth. And so for a few years, I was a scoutmaster, and this was one of our trips we were able to take out to Washington, D.C. And then there's a big scout camp out in West Virginia that we were spent a week at. But watching my kids grow up and watching some of their challenges and others, I felt like being able to contribute more than just from a medical role is helpful. And I know at least one of the individuals in our group here is on the autism spectrum, and so being able to help them be included, and he ended up being one of the best leaders for this group while we were there, and so being able to be part of that is also important for me. In the middle of the picture there, I'm standing next to the Vietnam Memorial wall. One of my uncles, his name is on the wall. His name is Lawrence Everett, my mom's oldest brother. He was lost in Vietnam, and it turns out in the year 2000, this is where his plane went down. They were able to go over and recover his remains from this site in Vietnam. So as part of my um, medical career in the military, I really wanted to support one of these missions. There are other sites around the whole Southeast Asia area where there are people that still have not come home. And so when I saw that, they were able to do this for my uncle, I wanted to be part of a team that could do that as well. And so 2 years ago, as one of the last international trips I did with the military, I was the medical leader for a group who went over to Laos and worked on 3 different sites. Part of that trip was to set up medical clinic days for the local workers that we had hired to help with the recovery efforts. And so we set up a little tent, and I would sit in the tent with my translator, and people would come in to be seen. And on this day, they had a contingent of the government of Laos came to see what we were doing and to talk with them. So I'm talking with one of their generals and one of their ambassador representative in these pictures here. Through all of these trips, I got to try a lot of different, sometimes crazy kinds of foods, and just experience the world in these different places, and feel like it was again just good learning opportunities, just to see and experience different cultures, to learn about different groups and the different challenges that they might have, which I think has helped in my own medical practice here. As I was finishing up my military career, I started working in the community more, and so through different things that happened, I was able to become the medical director at Kindering, which is in Bellevue. They're one of their main campuses in Bothell area. But what I do there is I go up a couple of days a month, and for children that have been identified by their therapist as potentially having autism or maybe other neurodevelopmental conditions, I will do evaluations for those families. Do something very similar through Encompass, which is in North Bend. And once or twice a month, I've been able to go there and see the families who are in that area. And then I was doing the same thing for Children's Therapy Center. They currently, through different loss of grants, have had to put a pause on that, on those evaluations, but was also helping with the families who were received their services. Uh, I was able to be hired by the Pearl Youth Residence, which is part of the Comprehensive Life Resources. Maybe you might be aware of their services in Tacoma. They do a lot of work with um, homeless and other disadvantaged populations for mental health services, one of which is running a CLIP facility. And I was able to be kind of a developmental pediatrics um, consultant to them, and would work with the children there who were there was concern for autism or other challenging behaviors. That's where I met Stanford, and grateful for that friendship and that to get to know him and to continue to work with him. Um, I no longer work at the residential facility, ended in January there, but again, just another aspect of kind of expanding my knowledge and abilities to young adults and some of the challenges that they experience. Um, Another thing that I've been able to do in the last couple of years is started doing medical reviews. So I will receive re where someone has been denied insurance coverage. They will appeal that internally to their insurer, and then what the insurance companies do is they do a secondary review. If the denial is still upheld, the families can then submit for what's called an external review. So that I receive all the records to do that external review. And I've learned quite a bit as I've done this. Different places around the country where speech therapy has been denied or ABA therapy hours have been questioned by the insurance companies. I will be able to review these and help decide, is this should this coverage actually be paid for, or is the insurance company right in saying that that they should not be providing this service? And it's been really eye-opening to see what different people have had to deal with across the country as they navigate their services. And most of these children who I review cases for are on the autism spectrum. And the way that that kind of, I don't know, it's like a tug of war back and forth between what insurance companies will want to provide and what they will not. And so I think it's helped me to understand some of those challenges and be able to help families navigate those here in Washington. So as I did retire from military service in August of last year, and as I was deciding what to do after that, I'm continuing some of the medical director roles that I have, but decided I wanted to open up my own clinic. I know that there are families. I know, Jessica, you mentioned you're on waiting lists. And I feel like for a lot of people, there's really no reason why you should have to be on a long waiting list. One of the main reasons is there's not enough people that are in the space of being able to do evaluations and provide diagnoses and to do that in the fairly complete and comprehensive but yet timely manner. And so um, started my own clinic called Developmental Pediatrics Northwest, and the website that I used to support that is called devomd.com. I live down in the Graham area, and so one of the closest therapy groups is Little Finn. And so the owner of the building where Little Finn is housed had an office that I was able to rent. And so my office is right next to Little Finn, and I've worked with them, and they've been able to send some families to me. And as I've started getting more known, I'm getting more referrals in every day and more calls. But I currently have fairly immediate access. I think my next appointment is next week on Wednesday. That's still available, and then some more the week after that. But I do really enjoy being able to provide that in-person kind of access and care. I am able to do telemedicine visits as well. I know there are services that will do that, but being able to bring families in to do the testing in person, I think is important. And so I wanted to have a space where I could do that. It's not like other doctors' offices right now where I just bring kids right into the room and we start evaluation. I know that some kids really have a lot of difficulty um, going to the doctor. They feel like they walk in, there's that familiar waiting room, and then there's a nurse that brings you back, and there's vital signs, and then the next thing they get are shots, right? So a lot of kids get really upset when they have to sit there and wait in the waiting room and kind of anticipate that. And I feel like bringing them right in and being able to just start talking with the families is kind of helps prevent some of that. And I think the families that I've seen have appreciated that. So what kind of services do we offer. So comprehensive evaluations. The one referral I get the most is, does my child or do I have autism spectrum disorder? We are a center of excellence for um, autism in Washington for the families on Medicaid, but also look for other neurodiverse conditions and can evaluate for those, as you see here, and many more that are not here. Beyond that, treatment management and planning, helping manage referrals to different services where they're needed, medication device management, education, and then an area where I think is growing and becoming more and more important for families is nootropic assistance. A lot of families are looking at ways they might be able to help manage whatever is going on in their lives and for their families with things that are not considered traditional prescription type of medications. And I think there's definitely a place for these. And in fact, that's one of the areas of expertise that Stanford has. And as we're working together, um, kind of sharing as we evaluate patients, that's an area that I feel like he really knows a lot about it. And I'd like to kind of ask him if he wants to jump in here and talk about that for a minute and some of the ways that you've seen these nootropic medications or supplements work for people. So Stanford, if you have a minute to jump on and share some ideas in that area, I'd love to hear from you.
He told me about that he would transfer to me about 15 minutes ago.
Yep.
So, I have nothing prepared, no slides. My background is in before I was a nurse practitioner, I worked in neuroscience. And as since I've been a nurse practitioner, I have really been diving in deeper into integrative psychiatry. And in autism specifically, we see a lot of difficulty with gut-brain health, as well as some known unusual interactions with where the neurotypicals, sorry, that's not the right terminology, but using that with SSRIs, people with autism typically respond to very low doses. And so looking at natural nootropics can oftentimes be less potent than our pharmaceuticals, and using them in stacks and in combination with pharmaceuticals can provide a better bridge with less overall side effects, and also to help with understanding and education with why there's hypersensitivity to certain um, additives or environmental conditions, and trying to address those as trying to understand more the causes and how we can better assist bridging that, as well as a lot of what I do is education for the parents about what is happening in their child's brain to help them negotiate better on how to parent and understand where their child is coming from. So I really see our bridge in integrative psychiatry as a way to address those concerns that traditional medicine may not have explored fully. And so that's my current addition to the team.
Thank you. So I really want to be able to offer the services that you can, and many families will come in, and I've had some that will show me, hey, I was told by my aunt to or someone that I should take this supplement, and I'm wondering if that's okay. And I feel like it's behooves us as medical providers to know about that and to know when to be able to or how to counsel families to say, oh, this is safe or this is not safe, and how to manage that, because I think it's something that families are being they're being bombarded with sometimes, or they're not sure, or maybe they don't trust um, traditional medicine as much and want to have a different option, and we were able to provide that. So thank you, Stanford, and appreciate your knowledge in this area. Other things to know, the website there, www.devomd.com, has more information and contact information, the ability to book appointments. There's the phone number. It very much have pretty immediate availability, and that's what I'd like to maintain. So that means we probably won't be as much involved in some like we're not as in like psychological kind of behavior therapy, and as it's close medication management, but definitely can assist primary care doctors in maintaining that. And as time goes on, that may change and may adjust to be able to provide more of that more longer term care for individuals. But I'd like to maintain availability to be able to see the new families that want and need to be seen, instead of having to wait for 2 or 3 years for an evaluation, to get that within a few weeks as much as we can. I do accept Medicaid insurance, all of the different Medicaid plans in Washington. For people right now, for people that are on other insurance plans, I am credentialed with United Healthcare plans, but others can choose to privately pay for the service, and I do provide a super bill that they can submit for reimbursement. Um, One of the things that I think we're all going to see more and more, which I started using, are different AI assisted technologies to help. As now, I'm not using that for diagnostic purposes, but when people come in, I do have a system that's kind of recording and keeping a transcript of the encounter, so that instead of me sitting there focusing on just writing notes and trying to keep track of what's happening, I can just focus on the child, focus on the family, have a conversation, and at the end, my system helps me coordinate and write up the documentation for that day. And it saved me a lot of time and a lot of ability. I feel like to be able to stay focused. I before it was, as I was trying to write notes, I'd look down and I might miss something the child was doing, or maybe them trying to, communicate with me in some way. And so now I feel like I can stay focused on the people in front of me instead of on other things that in the visit. And I think it's really um, helps the families feel like I get a really good look at their situation and their child, as I'm able to stay in that space with them. One of the things that often comes up when you work with families who have special healthcare needs or who are neurodiverse, there are a lot of people that end up getting involved in their life, a lot of multidisciplinary groups and collaborations that have to happen. And as I've looked into the research around multidisciplinary teams and groups and who should be involved and how effective those different members are, um, and I won't get into all of the details, but what has come out of that research is that, as you work on all of these areas you can see on the slide, the shared decision making and communication and how you really collaborate and educate one another and learn together, the individual in that group that seems to have the most and best impact over the long term are community health workers. Someone that can help take that family from that diagnostic moment through their different therapies and treatments and community resources. And really, that's the one that seems to provide the most impact. And yet, those are often the individuals who are the least represented or least supported in this. And so, Marcy Merriam, I saw she's joined here. I also work with her. She works with Kindering, also works with me as a community health worker for autism, but also she trains community health workers. So she is a systems navigator advocate, but she also has worked with many individuals, training them on how to do this. And so I'm going to turn some time over to her to talk more about that and about other areas of help that she provides to our families.
Thanks, Dan.
So I don't know if
So
you need to share
I
your
don't,
screen or if you just want to talk.
I think I'll just talk.
Okay.
So it's so good to see you. Many of you look so very familiar and so very grateful for the relationship that you all have with each other. And looking at like Jamie and Sarah and Emily and the beloved Kate, of whom I don't know where we would be without that Kate Orville. Anyway, so I do love community health workers, and just a little bit of background of where that all started. So we it a long time ago, when people were working out as migrant workers, that there would be an auntie or a primatora that people would come and see if something happened, and then this primatora auntie usually would then say, did you try this? Did you try that? Did you try the other thing? Before they brought in, yes, we need to go to the doctor. So that's kind of like the grassroots of how community health workers started. Then when the Affordable Care Act started, they found that community health workers, somebody that kind of lives in that in-between land, really gives comfort and direction and practical help to people that are going through medical situations of all sorts. So the other thing that we found is that during the pandemic, that up at Harborview, there were times that we were all shut in and things like this, and the primatora or community health worker was there and could talk to people, and they didn't feel like they needed to come into the emergency room, which in the height of COVID was a really great thing. So I have been pretty passionate about this idea of there being somebody alongside families as they are getting an autism diagnosis and going to the next thing. And as Dan said, I'm at kindering, so working with the little itty bitties, and just loving those families as they're finding out what autism is going to mean, what's that going to look like for their family, what happens next, what happens when they're done with the Birth to Three program and go on to the school district. But then also the families that we've been able to serve at Devo MD that are families that are looking for help, and then how do we get this going again with the school? How do we get this going with our PCP? And it's a great honor and privilege to come alongside the families that come through Devo MD. And yes, I have also been privileged to work along with Peds Northwest and also CISC, which is the Chinese Information Service Center. They have also become community health workers and brought that specific autism lens to how very valuable their time and their resources and their resource sharing is. So just very excited, hopefully, about the whole stuff about community health workers being able to be paid through Medicaid. That's all just out there. I mean, we're living in this interesting time, aren't we? Anyway, so I would strongly encourage you to take a look at this idea. Do you have a parent or somebody that maybe is a part of your clinic that is really passionate, that really wants to help the next generation, or would like to use what they've gone through to be a blessing to somebody else? Community health workers do not have to have their college degree, and being able to go ahead and get that training. That's also kind of a little bit different right now as we're waiting to find out how things are going to roll out. But really in the rural areas, well, everywhere actually, to have that extra layer, to have that person that can just listen to you, that is not necessarily the medical professional, but can help you sort out in your head, okay, when is it that this is urgent, that I need to go on to the medical professional, to be able to stand in the gap there, as well as stand in the gap as far as school and other things are concerned. So it is a great honor to get to do this work. It's great. I'm very excited about how things are happening in the South Sound with Dan's practice, and that's me.
Thank you, Marcy. And we'll finish up here in just a minute, and then if anybody has questions more about that, or for me, it'd be love to hear them. So again, yeah, that person, that community health worker or navigator for different systems is, I think, a critical part of the care that all families with different special health needs can utilize, and especially the families newly diagnosed with autism, they need that individual to help, and just to help guide them through the next few months as things move forward. And for my practice here in Charlotte, Marcy is that person, has been that person, and the family's just really benefit a lot from her help. So thank you. Just some other
That
things
sounds like
about
a job.
me. What, go ahead.
Sounds like a job for a parent navigator of sorts, since most of our jobs are just dealing with being on the ground and talking to people. Also, sorry, I'm right next to a street. I just really wanted to say something, but I didn't want to interrupt.
Right. So, I mean, whatever title you get, parent navigator, community health worker, system navigator, I think all are vital. And Marcy helps train individuals who need that type of training to know how to do that. And and parents who have been through that themselves have a great wealth of knowledge, and Marcy adds to that to help them, become even more effective at doing that. So, anyway, just some of the things I do have a kind of an adventure streak in me, and so I've been able to share that with a lot of my kids in different areas and different places we've been able to travel, and so just some of these things, and then of course diving. There's a whole world underwater we don't get to see, and sometimes I feel like, families feel like they're underwater, but there's a lot you can see and do underwater too. And as you experience that and then come up again, there's quite a bit that you can find and enjoy in the world. So I do enjoy doing all of that. And in the end, it's making sure that families are strong and that they support one another. And in the last year, two of my children got married, started their families, and as Marcy said, kind of keeping up with all these challenges are things that we all have to deal with, and it feels like this is where we are. But going into that, I like to share this picture because if you kind of look at this, I don't know if you can see my mouse there, but my wife and I are here, and this is our youngest daughter right behind me. And if you zoom in on our faces, this is how my wife and I feel about challenges. But you look at this younger generations and look at that face. I mean, she is totally excited to go jump into whatever's happening. And I feel like that's where our young people are, that they want the challenge, they're ready for it. And we need to help our parents kind of get over their fears to be able to support them. So hey, that's all I have. Anybody has any questions, I look forward to hearing and answering them.